I was a registered tow truck operator for about 2 years. It was a great job, pay was good, lots of overtime and on-call shifts. I got into the career because of shows that I watched as a kid, like Highway Through Hell. So when I got the chance to go into the field, I jumped on it. The first month was good. I learned a lot of experience and new skills. Part of our job as an RTTO was emergency calls with police and fire for crash scenes and impounds. So we saw a lot of tragic stuff. DUI fatality, hit and runs, non-DUI fatalities, etc. The job can be very emotionally and mentally draining and can mess you up if you're not careful. However, there's another kind of aspect to the job that not a lot of drivers talk about. The paranormal odd stuff or calls that unsettles you. Almost every tow truck driver has experienced it. It was a snowy cold November night in 2023. We didn't get a lot of calls that day, so I was just chilling at the shop for my on-call shift. The night was going by very slowly. We hadn't gotten any calls for hours. So I laid down for a bit, not expecting to get any call that night. Then all of a sudden I get a call for the broken Washington State Patrol car off this dirt road. I didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't too weird for me since I've gotten a few calls like it before. So I hop in my flatbed and drive up to the call's location. The directions took me a good 30 minutes outside of the city to the mountains on I-90. By the time I get off the freeway, it was super foggy and very hard to see, so I took it slow and easy to be safe. I keep driving up the now dirt mountain road and start thinking to myself that this is a really odd road for Washington State Patrol to be on, since they usually stay on the interstates and state highways. I didn't think much of it when I first got the call, because staters and sheriffs do occasionally go out on the more remote roads, but the road I was going on was unpaved dirt logging road. There was nothing out here, just the old logging road and trees. I try to rationalize it to myself that maybe the cop was just out here for an abandoned car, which would explain why he's all the way out here, since cars do get left and abandoned here often. So I just shrug it off and continue my way up the road. I finally get to the location and stop the truck dead in its tracks and just sit there for a minute. What the hell, I think to myself. The Washington State Patrol car was parked out on this mountain road with all its doors open, no lights on and no officers in sight. It was so foggy I really could only see the car, but it was clear to me there was no one there. I very heavily contemplated just turning around and going back, but eventually I decided to hop out and inspect the car and look for the officer, since he could have been injured after all. So I hopped out of the truck and grabbed my automatic rifle with my sidearm holstered, since I had no idea what I was about to walk into. I walked up to the car very cautiously. Just because I had my guns on didn't make the situation feel any better or safer. I first check out the driver's seat, then the passenger seat. Odd, I think to myself, nothing is missing. It was like everything was frozen in time. At this point, I'm starting to get a strange feeling like something is off. When I look into the trunk of the car and notice the officer's rifle is missing, I immediately freeze up and look around. As I'm looking around, I notice that the forest was dead quiet, no wind or anything. I've seen a lot of messed up stuff, dead bodies, entire families killed in one accident, but I was completely unnerved. Something inside me was telling me to get the hell out of there. I managed to gather my composure to do a walk around one more time, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Then I called my dispatcher just to make sure I had the right location and information. Sure enough, everything was correct. At that point, I was ready as hell to get out as fast as possible. Right before I turned the truck around, I yelled out just to see if I'd get a response. Nothing but dead air came back. Something is deeply wrong with this, I said to myself, and booked it out of there. The whole drive back, I had this sick feeling like I stumbled across something I was absolutely not supposed to see, or if I was even supposed to be there. I keep thinking why the cop was all the way out there, why he left the car, or why all the doors were wide open, or if it was even a cop in the first place. More or less, why was only the rifle missing when thousands of dollars worth of equipment were in the car? Once I got back to the shop, I called the police dispatcher that gave us the call. Since I knew her, I was hoping she could give some more answers. But no, she said the exact same thing that was said to me, that a Washington State Patrol car was broken down and just needed a tow. I never told my supervisor or anyone else out of fear that they wouldn't believe me. I mean, I wouldn't if I were them. I never heard anything about a missing cop after that, nothing on the news at all. It still creeps me out to this day thinking about it. When I was 18, I took a gap year doing voluntary work on a goat farm in a small village in France. I think I wasn't mature enough at that age, and I wasn't well enough prepared for living with strangers in a village where everyone was at least 25 years older than me. At least I took every opportunity to take my boss's car and drive to the nearest town, which was 40 kilometers away from where I lived and only had about 60,000 residents. I'd usually go there to meet some people my age or live an adventure. Since I knew nobody in that town and had no money, I could only meet people who, as me, wandered around having no destination. So I met a lot of homeless and alcoholic/drug addicted people living in the streets or on welfare. Most of them were very nice people, and me, having a helper syndrome, flourished by trying to talk them out of their situations, showing them hope and encouraging them to want more from life. I could tell more than just this story. I have lived a really weird period in my life back then, but one of the creepiest is the following. I hung out with my new friends, drinking a beer in the sun, when a guy came by who I've never seen before. He engaged in a conversation with me and seemed very polite. He asked me if I would like to smoke a joint with him, and I said, yeah, why not? He stated he had to get it at his place and that he would like me to go with him since he lived nearby. I checked if we had understood each other and told him, okay, but there you will get the green and I'll wait outside. We come back here to smoke, right? He affirmed, and we took off to get the stuff. On the way to his place, he started asking a lot of questions like, where in Germany are you from? Are you married? And stuff like that. I felt more and more uncomfortable, which reached its summit when he went on declaring that he neither wasn't married and was looking for a good woman to marry, like you. At his age, which was probably around 30, he was considered old in Armenia to be unmarried, he told me. I nervously giggled and was watching the environment to find a way out of the situation I put myself into. But there was no one in the streets. We hadn't met someone for a long time, and I doubted that I could run faster than him. Of course, he didn't live nearby, and we had been walking for at least 20 minutes at that point. I decided to play it cool, trying not to show him how uncomfortable the whole questioning and the whole situation made me. We finally arrived, and of course he tried to convince me to come into his apartment with him. No, I said. We agreed on getting the stuff and smoking with the others. We had some 3 minutes going back and forth with him telling me come on and me saying no way, and then he totally turned into a beast. He tried to grab me by my arm and pull me into the building. I started screaming, which he didn't expect, so he unfastened his grip on me. I cut loose and just ran away as fast as I could. There were people around, so I was pretty sure he wouldn't follow me, and he didn't. He just yelled insults after me. I ran until my lungs hurt too much to go further. I imagined in panic what could have happened by my own stupidity. But I was far from scenarios I developed later on. When I got back to my friends and told them about the story, they seemed to not be surprised, telling me that in this town, there were Armenian gangs like in that film Taken, who capture young women, take their passports and sell them or make them work as prostitutes. I don't know if that guy was one of these horrible people, but anyway, I'm so happy that I survived the encounter without any harm. More luck than reason or intelligence, as we would say in German. I learned 2 things back then. First, never ever trust a stranger, even if he seems so polite and seems like a nice guy just offering something without any hidden agenda. And second, unfortunately, you can't help every person on earth, and if someone is a drug addict and living in the streets, then possibility is high that they don't really care about anyone being around and being safe. I say that because I was shocked that none of those friends told me before leaving, hey, I don't think it's a good idea, or hey, I'll go with you, though they knew about those Armenian gangs. Maybe I learned a third thing about myself, but retrospectively, I was very naive at that age. As I knew nobody in that town, I got to know people who strayed the streets without any destination just as I did. A group of people took me to an apartment where a guy named Jules lived. Jules was so sweet, but also so lost. His eyes were as blue as the sky in spring with pieces of warm French sun in it. I saw him with his gentle smile by the window, a cigarette in the corner of his mouth. The other guys greeted him and entered his apartment by climbing through the window. Who are you? He asked with his soft, dark voice. I explained I just came to town and had to leave by night to go back to the village where I worked. He asked me to join them for a casual party. I found out that he hadn't been outside with the others because he had to wear an electronic ankle bracelet from the police. Basically, he was on house arrest, he explained. Not that he did something very bad, he assured, just multiple little thefts when he had no money left and 1 material damage on a car. For me, I made excuses for all he assumed having done wrong because I was naive and young, and somehow had an instant crush on him. Hours passed talking to each other, and little by little the group of people who had brought me to his place dropped off. In the end, There was just one guy, Jules, and myself. Then Jules asked me, "Can I ask you to do me a favor?" With little hearts in my eyes, I nodded, "Of course." He smiled. "I would like to do some nose candy." "No problem," I answered. "Well, there is one little problem. I can't go out to get it from my dealer. So I thought, maybe you could go there for me? It's just down the street. You really don't have to if you feel uncomfortable with it, but it could be fun." Despite the fact that I didn't do any of that stuff, I said, "Okay, give me the address, I'll go and get it for you." 5 minutes later, I stood in front of a spooky building. A large and buff guy stood between me and the door. His eyes told me that I should back off, but I had this mission for my gentle Jules. I cleared my throat and said with a high-pitched voice, "I'm looking for D. Jules sent me." He looked me up and down without saying a word and opened the door. I took the stairs, hearing him following me, and arrived in front of another door. I knocked, and another guy with a real hustler face opened the door and let me in. After, he closed the door with a key. I came to see the most stereotypical dealer's apartment situation. 2 guys stood by the windows, monitoring the street, and a fat black man was sitting on a couch. By his side, a very skinny, pale woman, probably marked by drug addiction. Her face looked like a skull. Dee smiled, but not in a gentle way like Jules, more in a malicious way. "Sit down," he said with a voice marked by mass cigarette consumption. Fear started to crawl up from my stomach to my head. I started to think to myself, this is not a safe situation at all. It was the last of 4 levels. The door was locked, and there was only one other woman from whom I clearly couldn't expect any help at all in case of danger. Also, there were firearms, which in Europe really isn't common at all. I thought to myself, okay, I have to fake self-assurance and fake having control over the situation, and I tried to look nonchalant on my chair. "Jules sent me," I explained. "He said you would know how much and that he had already paid." I smiled, but in fact a horrible thought came through. What if his payment is me? Dee laughed and nodded. "Yeah." He reached under the couch to get a box and opened it. Another weapon and white powder. He started weighing, and it took so long. I got more and more nervous. I rolled a cigarette and smoked to calm down and keep on looking nonchalant. "Here, try some," he said, putting a very large line in front of me. "Oh no, I don't really do any of that, but thank you." I refused. "Come on, it's not much. You've done it before, am I right?" "No, never. I've tried some other stuff, but I really didn't like it. I don't need white powder. It causes me too much stress, but really, thank you." We went back and forth like this for a while, him saying come on and me saying no thanks. I was so afraid of that powder, of him, and of the situation, but I somehow managed to stay cool and polite, or at least found the right words to decline him without him feeling insulted. But even after that, he wouldn't let me go, even when he packed what Jules had wanted. I swear I had to stay for an hour or something. But in the end, he gave permission for me to leave. He even gave me his number. "In case you made up your mind after taking some of Jules," he said. I just took his number. One of the guys finally opened the door and I sprinted down the stairs. When I arrived in the street, I was so lucky to still be alive and unharmed. Jules, you bastard. Who would put a girl in that kind of unsafe situation, I thought. But I couldn't be mad at him when I saw his gentle smile when I climbed through his window. Later on, I found out he didn't snort for fun, but for serving his addiction. He even did shots, not as I observed from friends to the nose. Well, another story indicating that I was a very naive 18-year-old and that you shouldn't trust an addict. Jules clearly didn't care about my safety after all, and having a crush can really mess with your judgment. But after all, it's Dee who I wouldn't want to meet again. I don't know how you handle it in America that every gangster and idiot can wear a gun. It really frightened me. In August of 2020, I had moved in with my aunt and uncle to an insanely small rural town in California. When I first moved there, a friend of mine had made it a point to show me that someone could drive across the whole town within 5 minutes, and at the time, I didn't realize how important that fact would become to the safety of me and my loved ones. My best friend Haley and I, her 17 and me being 18 at that time, were hanging out at a park that was about a 5 to 10 minute walk from where I lived. I say park because there were a few tables and benches, and it was technically known as a town park, but in reality, it was more of a small grass clearing surrounded by woods and a dirt trail near the bank of a river. I had started to frequent this place after moving, walking down to the benches and trail to smoke or sit by the water. I never really noticed any suspicious characters before this, even though I had been plenty warned about a couple creepers that were in the area, known for bothering young girls. Haley and I had been smoking for a bit, unbothered in the clearing, when we decided to finish out our trip with exploring the trail a little bit and just taking in the scenery. We had been walking and talking for about 5 minutes when I started to get this tension in my shoulders, like that feeling you get when you know someone is looking at you. I had looked behind us, and there was a man on the trail with us. Granted, this path is pressed right against this side wall of a gated community, so seeing people going on walks and jogging was fairly common. I told my friend of the man's presence, but she had written it off as me being anxious. But she had a good point. I tend to be a bit hyper-aware at times, but something about this man felt wrong in my gut. We kept walking, and I would periodically look back and keep a tab on the dark-haired middle-aged man walking about 50 feet behind us. After not too long at all, the man started picking up his pace. Calm, casual walking became more of a speed walk, and I turned around completely and started walking backwards to try and communicate to this man that I was completely aware of his presence. He had made towards the side of the trail, looking like he was going to walk through the brush down to the river, and I felt a bit stupid. I turned back around, walking forward again, when I looked back just once more to be sure he was gone. But as I was looking behind us for the last time, I see the man in a full sprint coming back onto the trail straight for me and Haley. I grabbed her sleeve with one hand and ripped out my pocket knife with the other. I can't remember what I said to her, but we started sprinting down the trail as well. I had never gone very far down the path, and I had no idea where it was going to take us, but the man running after us was blocking our path back to the clearing and the road, but we could hear his footsteps on the dirt getting closer. I let go of Haley's sleeve so I could pull my phone out and call my uncle as we were running. I told him we were being followed on the trail at the park, but I couldn't tell him exactly where on the trail, because I had never been much further than the entrance and I had no idea where it led to. My uncle had told me to stay on the phone and be loud so he could find me. I let out the loudest, shrillest scream I could, and we kept running until we reached what was the clear end of the path. We ran up on an old metal fence surrounding trees and what looked like an old abandoned house or shed. We had also reached the back corner of the outer wall for the gated community, and in that split second this seemed to be our best bet. I ripped us off the dirt path into some trees lining the cement wall and yelled at Haley to climb as fast as she could, pushing her from the bottom so she could use a tree and the ledge to clear the top of the wall. I tossed my pocket knife and my phone over, and I'm not even sure how I scaled the wall myself, but somehow I scrambled up over it as fast as physically possible. I landed next to Haley, basically face first, onto a neatly trimmed patch of grass inside the gated community, scaring a poor man who seemed to just be outside walking his dog. I became really aware of how strange we probably seemed. 2 teenagers panicking and yelling while holding a knife, but this man seemed to know that we were in trouble. He came over to ask us what was happening and if we needed anything. Haley started explaining our disruption to this calm neighborhood while I got back on the phone with my uncle and told him we made it into the gated community. Not even a minute later, my uncle came barreling towards the end of the path, and we could hear him shouting to the man on the trail that he had a firearm and all the things he was going to do with it. The man with his dog led us to a little access gate a ways back on the wall and unlocked it for us so we could meet my uncle on the path. My uncle told us that he had drove his car through the park all the way up to the trail entrance as fast as he could and started running for us, but he didn't see any man as he was going. He checked on us and I retold him what happened with more detail than I could have managed in my initial panic. He escorted us back down the trail to the car, firearm in full sight at the ready in case the man on the trail decided to reveal himself. We didn't see him on our walk back, and I haven't returned to this place since then. But any time after that I would leave the house before eventually moving, I was constantly paranoid I was being followed. We were never able to figure out who this man was, and I haven't seen him since that day. This happened to me on Friday, December 23rd, 2011. I'm a white female in my early 40s, and I live in an urban area known for violence, but I live in a rather decent part of town on a quiet dead-end street. It was early evening, but dark outside, and I was at my car parked in my driveway. I was cleaning out my car because I was about to take some people to the airport and was trying to hide the fact that my car can get rather messy. I have 2 dogs, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. I was just finishing up when a car drives up the street past me, turns around on the cul-de-sac, and then drops someone off about 2 houses up from me. I noticed the car, I noticed the man, but zero red flags were raised because I thought he'd been dropped off and was going into a nearby house. Also, he was incredibly casual. It's the one thing I feel shame in regards to this whole situation, that he didn't raise any flags inside me. How could I have been so obtuse? I know better. I walked from my driveway, around the front landscaped area into my stairs. I had heard him behind me, but assumed he was just going down the sidewalk to pass me. Just about the time I got to my stairs, the hair on my neck stood up and I got goosebumps. I tried to turn around, but it was too late. One hand grabbed my shoulder, and one hand pressed something hard into my back, and he kept me in the forward-facing position. He was taller than me, and I felt him lean down to whisper, "Shut up or get cut." I could smell alcohol on his breath, and let me tell you that being stabbed or killed with a knife is honestly my absolute worst fear of fears. I've always had nightmares about getting stabbed to death. I had just been to the bathroom a few minutes before, but I was so scared that even so, I let go of a tiny bit of urine. I wish my bladder had been full. Maybe he would have been disgusted and ran off. He kept hold of my shoulder, kept something in my back, and he pushed me upstairs and into my house. As we got inside, I tried to say something, hoping my tenant was home who lives across the hall in his own unit, but he said "shut up" through clenched teeth. The tenant wasn't home anyway. I live alone with 2 dogs, but both of them were frolicking in the backyard and didn't come inside while this was going on. I'm glad of that because my littlest one is only 20 pounds but fearless and would have bit the hell out of this guy. He might have gotten hurt or killed. Little guy actually did bite a mugger once, but that's another story. My lab, on the other hand, would have ran over to be pet because she loves absolutely everyone, even scumbags. Once he pushed me into the house and looked around while still holding me, I could tell that he was disappointed because I heard him say "shit" under his breath. I don't have a flat screen TV or other fancy equipment. I live simply and frugally. I have a 15-year-old tube TV, a Nintendo Wii, a 20-year-old bookshelf CD/radio player, and a MacBook. That's it. I don't do Christmas, so there was no tree and no presents either. He pushed me into the bedroom, which is right off the living room, and then shoved me away from him toward my bed. I remained standing, but I finally got to turn around. I was terrified to look at him in the eye. I didn't want to aggravate him. I concentrated on his shoes, his very distinctive shoes that I was able to later identify. I also got a look at the huge knife he was holding, and a new wave of adrenaline shot through me and made my eyes kind of blurry. I felt dizzy, like I couldn't get enough air, but I was breathing heavily at the same time. My knees felt weak. I felt my insides were jelly and that I was going to vomit. I had never been more scared in my life than that moment. I told him to take whatever he wanted, but please leave me alone. He said, "Take off your pants," and he stuck his hands down his pants to start rubbing himself. I said, "Okay, but I have AIDS. You need to use a condom. I have some." I don't, but I was hoping to avoid getting an STD or AIDS if I survived this. He smirked. "I've heard that one before. Take them off." 2 thoughts went through my head at the same time. He's done this before. Damn, he's calm. And he was calm. He wasn't breathing heavily. His voice wasn't strained. He wasn't sweating. This was just another day at the office for this waste of human flesh. And just then, by the way he was saying things, something about his tone and his attitude, I absolutely knew he was going to SA, then murder me, then rob me, in that order. Dead certain. I've never been more sure of anything. Then the oddest thing happened. In the space of about 3 seconds, I calmed right down. I got clarity. My mind was clear, clean. I could see, taste, smell, think, like a god, or goddess in this case. I realized it was just the adrenaline, but I've never felt anything like it. I stopped shaking. I stood there marveling at this new feeling for a moment before he repeated the order to take off my pants. So I did. In the time it took me to take off my pants, I had already formulated a plan because it was only then I remembered something that was nearby. I was about to get all sweet and coy and play along by telling him I'm so glad you came over tonight, I'm so horny, etc. The plan was to lay down on the bed while talking to him and then reach and wait for the right moment to pull out my gun that I have attached to a custom holster on the back of the nightstand. I was going to shoot him point blank in the temple if I had to. I didn't have to do that because as soon as I took off my pants, I think he thought he had me under control because it was his turn to do the oddest thing. He turned around and started rummaging in the living room, opening the china cabinet and closet. He was only out of my line of sight for about 3 seconds, but that gave me enough time to reach for the gun. It's a .38 revolver with no funny business about cocking it or safety. It's just point and pull the trigger. I had the gun raised and leveled at him by the time he came back to the doorway, and my hands were not shaking. I said, "You better get out of here, mother." I didn't get a chance to finish the sentence because he reacted instantly, saying, "Oh shit," as he headed for the door faster than could be believed. I followed him out, locked the door, went to put on pants, then called the police. Though the police got there within a few minutes, alas, they were unable to catch the guy. He still hasn't been caught, and I doubt he will be. They were unable to lift prints on the very few things he touched. I was completely unhurt physically and mentally. I'm recovering just fine. A few addendum points and asides. I owe the story of my survival to my good friend Michael, rest in peace, who willed me his gun when he died a number of years ago. He didn't like that I lived alone in the urban area that I do. Thank you, Michael, wherever you are. I love you and I miss you terribly. Thank you for saving my life from beyond the grave. I also owe the story of my survival to the custom holster I had made, then installed on the back of my nightstand so that it was both hidden and within easy reach. The total cost was $100 for everything, and I'd wish I'd done it sooner. I've had this gun for a number of years, and always kept it in the back of the top shelf in the closet. Had it still been there in the closet, I never would have gotten to it on time. Yes, I know that I could have shot him, and technically I should have shot him, since he was in my house, and about to SA/murder/rob me, and within 21 feet of me. However, I'm satisfied that I gave him a warning and the opportunity to save his own life. I think I would be much worse off psychologically if I had taken his life, for I'm not a killer. It would be tough for me to live with that. That said, I also learned something valuable about myself, and I think it's the best thing to come out of this experience. At the gun safety class I took, and the private instructor I got lessons from, all said the same thing to a female who was scared of guns at first. Don't pick up a gun and point it at someone unless you know you can do it. Otherwise, the bad guy will take it away and use it on you. As a female who has never pointed a gun at anyone and only used it on the range, you just can't know what you can do until the moment comes, if it ever even comes, and we hope it doesn't. Well, I know in my heart that had he come toward me instead of going left toward the front door, I would have emptied that gun into him. No question, no hesitation or reservation. I'm glad I know that now, and I hope I never have to use that knowledge.